This is Roster Castanado interviewing Brad Rader at the November 2018 San Fernando Valley Comic Book Convention. So now, what projects are you currently working on?
Well, currently, in 2018, I worked on a pitch for a Fox TV series that sold, so I can tell you about it. It's called Bless the Hearts, and they're starting to staff up for it now, and I interviewed Monday to work on it. So I may be working on that in this coming year. And I just got done spending a month doing storyboard reversions on the network streaming series called Big Mouth, which you're talking about, well, Bob's Burgers being a well-written series. Big Mouth is another well-written series. Other than that, I spent the last year working on updating my portfolio, and right now I'm working on a short comic story for a gay comic horror science fiction anthology that I'm supposed to complete all the work for in April. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Very nice. Okay, and so did you have any favorite cartoons before you started animating and writing comic books?
Well, I like Jonny Quest. Jonny Quest was like a big series for me when I was a kid. I liked Bugs Bunny and the Tiny
Toons.
Well, no,
Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes. But when I got into the animation industry, I got into the animation industry in 1983, and I'd stopped watching cartoons in like the early 70s, and it seemed to me like all the cartoons were just crap. I came into the industry just as, actually, when it was possible to start doing interesting animation. I came in 1983, and Bluth had done Space Ace and Dragon's Lair, and DIC was starting to do stuff like The Littles, when it was like the manga anime influence was coming into animation, and so I sort of came in with a wave of people. Actually, I came into it in 1984, working for DIC, which was a French, American, and Japanese co-studio. I for the first time became aware of anime, and I was working for Japanese directors and the French directors. My director was on The Littles, when I started working on The Littles, was Bernard Duray. Oh no, I was working on Rainbow Bright. He was Bernard Duray, who had done a French-Japanese co-production version for French TV based off of the Ulysses character from like a Greek myth. It's like science fiction odyssey. And so he was basically, before that, my schooling had all been like the Hanna-Barbera, so like right to left, everybody cut off at the way so he wouldn't have to do walk cycles kind of filmmaking. And he was, remember my first storyboard from him, I'd come from like a year of working on Hanna-Barbera style shows, and I did a storyboard for him, and he asked me when I handed it in my roughs to be like critiqued, if I wanted to do my own changes, and I said sure, because I actually desperately wanted to do my own changes, because I'd started in the industry without getting any really instruction. I didn't really know what I was doing, so anybody who was willing to put some teaching into me, I was like totally happy for. And I watched on the spot as he redrew, just sketched out thumbnail size, changes on 2/3 of my storyboard. And I was going, yeah, but I followed the script. And he would plus things out by like, add mood, add like lightning flashing through the windows and light changing inside the room and playing things up for mood, and suspense. Whereas I was just following the script, and he said, yes, but is this not better? And I was like, oh, okay. Because when I was working for Ruby Spears the year prior, which was a Hanna-Barbera subsidiary. I was told the first thing I should do is cut out the script and tape it down on the storyboard, and that was just totally out the window with Bernard at DIC. And I realized that I could be a filmmaker. I could Bernard redrew 2/3 of this. I had done 2/3 of the storyboard. He redrew 2/3 of that, sent me home to complete the rest of it. And it was like I was sitting there at 2 a.m. going, oh wow, I can make this real. This doesn't have to suck. I can actually, make a real movie out of this. And that was sort of like a real life-changing event for me.
Very nice. Why would you say those cartoons were your favorites?
Jonny Quest, well, as it turns out, they were created by Doug Wildey and Alex Toth, who I didn't know who they were when I was 8 years old, but when I was in high school, I discovered their artwork as doing comic books, and they became two of my favorite artists. In fact, I actually met Doug Wildey at Ruby Spears in 1983 because he was freelance for them too, and so the Jonny Quest shows are really stylish, really well designed. The soundtrack was really cool. The voice acting was really good. The stories were pretty well written. So that was like a high watermark for years. Yeah.
Very nice. And what were the first comic book and the first animated series that you worked on?
The first animated series I worked on was Rubik's Cube. It was a cartoon animated merchandising spin-off of the Rubik's Cube toy. That was for Ruby Spears back in 1983. And the first comic book I worked on was Batman Adventures for DC in 1993.
Cool. What was it like to work on those?
I was fired from Ruby Spears before 2 months were up because they would have had to, if they'd kept me on any longer than that, it being a union show, they would have had to give a reason to fire me. And I wouldn't have hired me in the first place was because I was straight out of art school. I didn't know anything about storyboarding. I didn't know anything about film. And the director hired me because he was really into comic books. That was why he was using Doug Wildey, Jack Kirby, Gil Kane, and Alex Toth as freelancers working on his projects. So he liked some of the comic book samples in my portfolio, and I had one storyboard I'd done as a sample, as a marker comp that I'd done as an advertising job, and so he hired me on the basis of that. So on one hand, I have to be really grateful for John Dorman for hiring me without, I had no experience. I didn't really have the drawing chops. I wasn't ready, but I got the best school you can have, which is being paid to do a job and having to complete. Before I started working professionally, it would take me forever to complete a project because I'd come to something I didn't know how to draw and kind of go step aside, put it aside, try again in a month, still not know how to draw it. Whereas when you're doing storyboards for animation, you have a schedule and a deadline. In a storyboard, you have to do, the drawings are about this big, and you have to do 4 of them per page, or sometimes 6. On the Ruby Spears Hanna-Barbera boards, the storyboards were on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, 6 panels per page, and you'd have to do a third of a show in 3 weeks. So, say 150 pages times 3 or by 6 or whatever, that's a lot of drawings you got to do in 3 weeks. So if you don't know how to draw something, tough, draw it anyway and be quick about it, So that is a great way to gain mastery. I'd say, I started working professional in 1983. I'd say by 1987, I'd gained mastery, where I was, working at a level, a professional level, and even sometimes an inspired level. By the time I got to working on Batman in 1991, I could not only draw what was in my head, it was actually better than what was in my head, because as I'd be drawing it, I'd get ideas that would make it better. I got my first comic gig in 1992, working on the Batman spin-off animated TV comic, and that was really hard at first. I mean, it took 2 issues of that before I started to click doing comics. And then that led to my second job, which was a series for Dark Horse. It's a mini-series that I spent all of 1993 doing. It came out in 1994. My sadness about comic books is I could never stay doing it long enough to sort of get momentum. Like I'll do it for like a year, then I won't do it again for like 5 years or something like that. So that's when.
Very nice. Well, thank you for allowing me to interview you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rossiter.
Thank you, Rossiter.
You're welcome. Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
That was Rossiter Castanado interviewing Brad Rader at the November 2018 San Fernando Valley Comic Book Convention.